everyone. No discussion about contracts would be complete without also talking about the types of remedies that are available. So in contracts, we don't usually use the word damages, we use the term remedies. And the remedies describe what can that non-breaching party recover. In other words, if you were to sue someone in court for not performing, for breaching a contract, what can you get? So the words we're going to use here are very different from the ones we introduced in our unit on tort law. If you remember, we talked about tort cases, personal injury cases. If you think back to the hot coffee example that we discussed on the discussion board, tort damages fall into two categories of compensatory damages and then punitive damages meant to punish. Here, we're going to not use the words compensatory and punitive. I'm going to introduce you to some new terms. But one overarching principle to keep in mind is that there are no punitive damages available in contracts. And that is because nobody is getting rich off a contracts claim. Contracts are really meant to put parties back to where they are supposed to be or where they would have been in had one of the parties not breached. Nobody's going to walk away with a huge windfall, or you're not going to hear about frivolous contracts cases. It's really more from a business perspective to try to put parties back on that even playing field before one of the parties breached. So in order to understand how contract damages work, we're actually going to walk through some contract hypotheticals so that you can see how the courts would award damages to fix the problem. So remedy example number one goes like this. This is an example taken straight from your textbook. So the story goes like this. Imagine there is a movie studio, we're going to call it Ace Studio. And they contract with an actress named Raina. And she is like some big important actress. The movie's going to make a lot of money. And they're going to pay her $3 million to be in the movie. And then Ace Studio goes to a musician and says, Spinham, we're going to pay you $2 million to make the music for this movie. And Spinham is really excited because they know that she's a big actress. The movie is going to be a big hit. So now Ace has two contracts, right? They have a contract with the actress and they have a contract for the music. But then what happens if Raina backs out? What if Raina breaches the contract because she is offered, let's say, double the amount of money to perform somewhere else? So Raina breaches the contract. And now Ace Studio wants to sue Raina and says, Raina, you broke the contract. So that would be a breach of contract lawsuit. Ace Studio is the plaintiff, Raina is the defendant. So we've got this lawsuit going on. But what happens in the meantime? Let's imagine two other events happen as a result of this breach. Number one, Ace now has to hire a new actress, and it's going to cost them $4 million for the new actress. And then guess what else happened? Spinham says, we don't want to do this movie anymore. We only wanted to be part of the movie if Raina was in it. And now Spinham breaks their contract also. Ace is in a world of trouble. So let's imagine that Ace can win its lawsuit against Raina. What kind of remedy or what kind of damages should Ace Studio be awarded? Well, if you've been wondering, can the court force Raina to drop her other job and come back to Ace Studio? I think you've already figured out that that's just not possible. Courts don't do that. So where does that leave Ace Studio? Remedy number one in contract law is called expectation interest. Expectation interest means that the damages, the remedy, is going to put the non-breaching party, that would be Ace Hardware, not Ace Hardware, Ace Studio, back in the place it would have been in had Raina performed. So where would Ace Studio be if Raina performed? First, we break it down into these three categories: direct damages, consequential damages, and incidental. So let's imagine that in the meantime, after the Raina backed out, as we know, they were going to pay her $3 million. But now they have to hire a new actress, and the new actress costs $4 million. That's the price of this new contract. So the direct damages that flow directly from Raina breaching her contract and not being in this movie amount to the $3 million. You take the $4 million that the Ace now has to pay the new actress and subtract the $3 million they had already planned on spending on Raina. which means the direct damages that flow directly here that ACE can recover from RENA is the $1 million difference. This is what I mean by contracts cases not making anybody rich. ACE doesn't get back the $3 million that they were supposed to pay RENA. They don't get that. They get the difference between what they had already expected to pay. Remember, they expected to be out $3 million, but now they're out $4 million for this new actress. They can recover the $1 million difference from RENA. Okay, that seems pretty fair, right? But now what about the fact that Spinum is no longer part of this movie studio contract because they didn't want to pay, they didn't want to be part of a movie that RENA wasn't in? These types of damages can also be recovered, and they're known as consequential damages. It's like the next step damages, not the ones that flow directly. Some courts also call them special damages. Special damages can be recovered by ACE. What this means is ACE can also recover the damages from Spinum not wanting to perform under their contract. But here's the trick. Only if RENA knew about that, knew that the only reason that Spinum was part of this contract was because of her being in the movie. If she knew that and then she breached the contract, then ACE can recover special damages as well. The third type of damages that fall under this one called expectation interest go like this. What if, in hiring this new actress for the movie studio had to send its producers around the country, buy plane tickets, hotel rooms? What about all those other costs that are associated with the breach? Those are known as incidental damages, and ACE can recover those as well as part of their remedy under expectation interest. So when we talk about expectation interest, we tell ourselves these are the types of damages that are available, the type of remedy that's available that can put the non-breaching party back in the place they would have been in had the breaching party performed. So had RENA performed, the company would have been out $3 million for their contract only. There's that calculation for the direct damages. They would have had a successful contract with the musician. That's your special damages. And they would not have had to spend airfare and hotel and extra time finding a new actress. There's your incidental damages. So this is remedy example number one. But how would we take expectation interest and apply it here to remedy example number two? Imagine George makes silk scarves. That's what he does for a living. And he contracts with the mall because the holiday season is coming up, hypothetically, and he would like to sell his scarves at one of the kiosks in the mall. So he enters into a contract and maybe he agrees to pay Burlington Mall $1,000 a month during the holiday season so he can make his scarves. And let's say they enter into the contract in September. Well, all throughout September, George is making his scarves and getting them ready to sell because he knows he's going to have this kiosk and he's going to have it set up, let's say by November 1st, so he can sell all his scarves throughout November and December. And on October 31st, Burlington Mall breaches and they decide not to give the kiosk to George. Well, now what? Has there been a breach? Absolutely. Burlington Mall has breached the contract by not giving George his promised kiosk. But what kind of remedy does George get? In a case like this, if we were to apply expectation damages, it doesn't work. The question would be, where does George expect to be had Burlington not breached? In other words, we'd be asking ourselves, how many scarves would George have sold? How much money would he have made during November and December during the holiday season from the sale of his scarves? Well, if you're sitting there thinking, I don't know, you're exactly right. It is completely unknown. Even if George had a kiosk last season and the season before, we don't know how many he would have sold this season. And courts do not like to guess on damages. So in a case like this, George doesn't get to use expectation damages. He uses a different calculation, a different type of remedy called reliance, because expectation damages don't work. Reliance damages look a little different. These types of damages put the injured party, that's George, the non-breaching party, back in the place he would have been in had the parties not entered into the contract. So what would that include? Think about this from George's perspective. He is not going to get his lost profits because the court cannot possibly say with any certainty how much money George would have made, how many scarves he would have sold. So what does he get back? Well, he really gets back the money that he spent on materials and supplies. Does that seem not fair to you? You're right. Reliance damages are not perfect. They're very difficult to quantify, and they're very difficult because they usually don't put the plaintiff, the injured party, where he wanted to be. Definitely, George would have made more money. Well, we like to think anyway, that he would have made more money had Burlington Mall performed, but they didn't. And because we don't know how much money he would have made, courts are not going to guess at the lost profits, and they're only going to give George reliance damages. Okay, a third type of scenario goes like this. And there's actually several of these examples in your book, but I'll just go over one of them here. What about an example like this? I contract to buy a new home. Let's say the house cost $100,000. Clearly, it's not here in Massachusetts. So I want to buy a $100,000 house from the seller. And I give a $20,000 deposit. And then we have a date for closing, and we agree on that date. I will show up with a check for the rest, and the seller is going to give me clear title, meaning they're going to give me the house free and clear to me. And then the date arrives, and the seller doesn't show up. The seller breaches. So now where am I? I just paid $20,000 for this house, and I didn't get the house, and I'm out $20,000. So now what? In an example like this, the court will apply what's called restitution. Maybe you've heard this word before because we use it in even our regular day language. Restitution returns that injured party back to where he was before the contract. This is really out of a notion of fairness. And in a case involving restitution, I would get my $20,000 back from the seller. They would not be able to keep my deposit and breach the contract. That doesn't exactly seem fair. All right, I've only got a couple minutes left on this PowerPoint, and I just want to introduce you to a couple other important concepts. In the law, we have other remedies besides these monetary remedies that are called equitable remedies. Equity is something that a court can do out of fairness. It's kind of a court-created remedy. And the three that come up in contracting are specific performance, injunction, and reformation. Specific performance actually is the one I really want to focus on, and that's where a court can actually force a party to do something. For example, if we contract for a piece of art, there's no other piece of this art. It's the only piece that's ever been created, and you breach and don't sell it to me like you promised, the court can actually force you to give me that piece of art because I can't get it somewhere else. It's so unique. So specific performance is only available when it comes to unique items that can't be purchased or found or recreated somewhere else. So also look up injunction and reformation. Those are other examples of equity remedies. The last thing I want to say about damages is just to mention something called mitigation and liquidated damages. Liquidated damages, I'll dispense of really quickly. Those are damages that are already written into a contract. They literally say if the seller breaches the contract or if the desk delivery company doesn't get the desks there on time, this is what the damages will be. Parties agree to liquidated damages when it's very difficult to figure out what those damages would be during a lawsuit. So in the contracting process, the parties set up already what those damages would be and they put them in the contract. Last, but certainly not least, is the concept of mitigation. Mitigation means that when a party breaches, the non-breaching party has to do what they can to keep the damages as low as possible. So in George's case, if he can sell the scarf somewhere else, he should. We should always try to keep damages low. No one is supposed to ever make money and get super rich off a contract claim. And that's the idea of mitigation, that the non-breaching party also has that obligation. All right, That's the end of contract damages.